All right, guys, we are back. We're knocking the episodes out here. Content coming. We are on episode 8 of Invest with Instinct. I'm really excited for this one. We had a scheduling kind of gap there. It was going to be a while back, but finally got him here. This is Jason Sue, and I'm just going to let him kind of tell you a little elevator pitch of who he is, because this is a kind of unique and different conversation that I'm having. So, welcome to the podcast. And give him the rundown.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I was initially confused why you wanted to talk with me because my investing strategy for 20 years has been buy and hold and don't sell, because that's all I know, and I don't have time to do anything else. But yeah, like checking out your content is like, okay, I see what this is about here. Let's learn how to tap into what the gut feeling is and how to differentiate that from what kind of logic would tell you, and how to perform from a place of kind of just trusting that like what you feel is good enough, and that you don't need to be able to explain every point and detail in your decision making process, when you're especially when you're under stress. Because when you're under stress is when all of your kind of behavior patterns and old habits are going to come out and kind of bring you down, and you've got to learn how to stay centered and present and trust yourself. And so that's my work. That's what I do with almost all poker players, although it's been kind of interesting in the last maybe 3 to 4 months or so. A lot of people who trade for a living have been hitting me up, which was certainly not my intention. But the crossover is undeniable in terms of what it takes to be successful in both. And so pretty much all I do is work with people to kind of identify where's the friction, right? Where's the thing that holds you back from being able to stay present and do what you deep down feel is right, right? What's the thing that keeps you from being able to listen to that, to actually identify that? And then once you know what that is, what kind of keeps you from actually executing it? How do you stop yourself from trusting that gut instinct? Because, when I work with people, they always tell me like, oh, every time I make a huge mistake, I didn't go with my first instinct. My first instinct is right like 90% of the time. If I could just learn how to do that and follow it, I'd have way more money and way more success. And so that's pretty much what I help people with.
That's really awesome. Yeah, and the crossover is insane. When it comes to that last point you just mentioned, do you feel like there is a kind of level, a basic level you have to get to? Because I remember talking to, let's say I'm at the poker table and I'm playing against an average recreational player who says like, "Oh, I knew I should have done that." That's what their gut
Yeah.
told them. But really they're just not at the skill level to actually realize like, no, that would have been a very actually bad decision to do. That gut instinct right there was not, that wasn't actually proper. So where is that kind of crossover? Like, is it just come with time and getting to a certain level of experience? When do you know somebody needs that type of help, or the actual just kind of basics?
Yeah, I think if you're a beginner at whatever you're doing, you would still get a lot of value out of
You're
kind
good.
of
I just put it on you.
okay. Yeah, no, I was just like looking at myself, which is like freaking me out. So if you're a beginner, then whatever you're doing is going to still be helpful and valuable in terms of being present in the moment. It's just not going to translate into significantly more profit, because what being present in the moment does and being able to trust your instinct does is it maximizes your knowledge, right? So if you don't actually have knowledge, it's not going to turn into a whole bunch of money. You will experience a great amount of significantly improved happiness in your relationships and in your relationship with yourself and other things. But for fields that you don't have a lot of knowledge in, it's not going to translate into a whole bunch of profits. So, I personally believe that whatever your field is, if it's poker, trading, sports, whatever, you need to always be building the technical skill and always be learning and growing. And then this other piece of it in terms of presence is how you unlock it, right? So the first one kind of sets your ceiling for what you're capable of, but it by no means guarantees that you're going to reach it. And the second piece that you bring to it of like, how do you do it in your own way that feels just right in each moment? That's the thing that's going to actually turn the knowledge into the results that you're wanting.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It just, yeah, there's a, seems like a big kind of gap between the two, because one thing I would feel back when I was like in my early days would be more of like, I feel like looking back, there were defense mechanisms, right? Like some sort of uh just like Oh, I didn't want to. I shouldn't have played that hand because like my gut was telling me like remembering sometime I lost a big pot or whatever, and it was like this way to avoid risk or something like that in a certain scenario, and I thought that I was kind of confusing the two things of back when I didn't really understand anything of like oh, I'm protecting myself or I'm just scared, right? And I didn't know to recognize being scared. And,
Yeah.
then I would like overcompensate and go the other way and like force something in the next hand that didn't feel right. But like, it's just constant back and forth. So it's really
Yeah.
cool to get to a level where you can start to hone in on like those feelings in the moment. Presence is like a vague word, right? It's something you've said probably a million times in the last few years. How do you best explain presence in the moment when it comes to poker trading or any sort of pressure moment?
I like to think of it as more of a feeling than an idea, right? And so lots of people who are more in their heads, they'll think about it as an idea. I want to be fully present, and then they just say that, and I don't know, maybe they'll go meditate or something. But it doesn't matter unless you actually can feel it inside you, right? And the experience that I think is pretty universal is one where you feel pretty connected to what's happening inside you, both your thoughts, your emotions, and you're not really resisting anything that you're experiencing, right? You're in total acceptance of like I feel how I feel and I'm okay with it and I feel kind of good in myself while also being able to engage with what you're seeing in the outside world, right? So if you're just doing it inside, but you are unable to kind of pay attention and see stuff going on around you, well, that's not going to work out real well for you, right? And if you're just hyper focused on what's happening outside of you and what's going on, then you're not able to kind of tune in and listen to, well, what do I want and what am I feeling? And so it's an experience of having both at the same time, which is what allows you to kind of notice the little subtle things that are happening and have these awarenesses of like, oh, this is how I would like to adjust in this moment, and it's not even anything that you're trying to do, right? When you're present, the experience is just that your mind is like, oh, I think this would be awesome and it feels good when I think about that, so let's go and make it happen.
So it's the connectivity between like the awareness of it, of whatever you're feeling at a certain point, and then the ability to kind of also then act in that similar moment in a way that kind of aligns best with those feelings rather than like having the feelings being overwhelming and then much later being able to think back and be like, oh, that's what I should have done. It's like trying to meld those two together into the same moment.
Yeah, and I guess the easiest way to say it would be to say like you're just not in your head about everything and not trying to like overanalyze and need everything to make sense. It just feels right, and that is plenty good enough for you to go about your business.
Hmm. Yeah, that's like the ultimate level of trust, right? Like trust in yourself.
Mhm.
That's pretty cool. Why do we do this? Like, why do we gamble? Like, why are we drawn to this game or poker or trading and stuff? Like, what are some of these traits that somebody like me, somebody like you, because we're all different in a lot of ways, yet somehow we're attracted to this. So, like, what are some of those kind of broad traits and things that draw us to this?
Probably, I mean, the biggest thing I would say for poker, I can't speak for trading specifically, but I would say for poker, the number one thing that draws people in is essentially just being able to do what you want to do, right? On a day-to-day basis, moment-to-moment basis, and not really having to answer to anybody, which is ironic because that ends up being the thing that kind of takes people down and lowers their performance because the thing is when you start in a game like poker, you don't have a lot of knowledge, so all you have is your ability to use your intuition and experiment and play, and you're not really having this agenda of like I need to win, I'm supposed to win. But as you grow your knowledge, as you get better, as you progress, you start to build these expectations, not just around like results that you think you're supposed to get, but also in terms of ways that you're supposed to perform, decisions you're supposed to make. So it ends up becoming like, oh, I'm supposed to do this because the book said this, or I'm supposed to do that because my mentor or my coach told me this thing. And when those things start to override and rule over like this is what I feel and this is what I want. Well, now you have that disconnect and you're no longer operating from this place of being present in the moment. And ironically, like it's the freedom to choose what you want that brings people into these fields, I think, because you don't have to answer to anybody and work at a 9 to 5. And then there's this like golden period where that's happening and you're really trusting that and you're also learning and growing at the same time. But then you hit a plateau where it's like, I have this knowledge, and then you start going into, I'm supposed to, I should do this, I need to do this. The, the book says to do it this way. This is what that person would say. And then it starts to become less fun. You're performing not as well. And then the burnout hits and is like, should I be doing this? And that's the arc that like so many people go through in poker. And I'm sure trading as well would be my guess.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. All the same things. So do you feel like in a way we like lose almost like in real life, like when we grow up into adults, we lose the ability to play in a sense. Like we kind of forget
Yeah.
how we learn everything, the creativity, the flowiness, the I'm gonna just go push the boundary over here and like see where I run into and like skateboarding or something, and then you get out of college and get kind of conformed into like a box and all of a sudden you lose the childhood in a way. And so you think in
Yeah.
that we kind of go through a mini version of that arc within these games.
Yeah. I mean, the play is beaten out of us way before we graduate college, right? So
Sure.
if you think about just in school, there's okay, you get like 30 minutes to play, and then the rest of the time is like, okay, we're here to learn and be serious and get stuff done, right? But there's just like this one block is for play, but that's just completely arbitrary. And so then we're being taught that like play is not the norm. It's like the reward you get for being serious and
Mm.
following the rules and like doing things the way that you're told, right? And so it's kind of just beaten out of us real early in life. But if you look at a bunch of kids before that period of life, they're having a blast and they're always making up new rules and pushing the boundaries and trying stuff. And if they don't like it, it's like, okay, no big deal. I'm gonna now let's try this. Right. But whereas when we grow up into adults and it's like, oh, I tried this move and it didn't work. Oh, I suck. I'm the worst. I'm stupid. And we stay here in this place of beating up on ourselves and feeling bad about it. Whereas the person who hasn't learned all that stuff yet is just like, oh, it didn't work. Okay, well, let's try this. And that level of flexibility is just hugely different.
Yeah, and then everybody around you, if you do make that mistake, it seems like, well, they're like, well, yeah, I mean, you should. Oh, let's just say you wanted to go play poker, right? And you failed. You went broke, and every single person is going to be like, I told you so. Like, stick to the plan, buddy. What are you trying to do going and having fun and exploring and being
Yeah.
dangerous? Like, come back to the box that we're all in. It's sad.
Yeah. Yeah. Mediocrity and being belonging, right, is super compelling reason to not step out of the box because there's nothing worse than like not being part of something, right? And so that ends up being a way that like the commitment to play and exploration and trying stuff kind of falls off because it's like, oh, then I'm all alone. And so what you've got to do is come to it inside yourself of, yeah, this is super important to me. I want to explore this part of me and find acceptance and community and all that other stuff, right? So it is possible to have both, but certainly there will always be people who, when you step down to these paths that are not as popular, they will try to bring you back. It might feel like they're trying to bring you down, but really they're just scared that you're leaving, right? And
Yeah,
and that's all it is.
yeah. It's funny because in trading, this idea of being a contrarian has become so popular, and it's like these people that off thrive off being the person that goes and does it alone and is against the grain. And now with the ability to kind of share your ideas and create a business almost off being contrarian, they almost go the like total opposite way, and they're like, I can't have any idea that's consensus, and if it is, like, I'm failing in my like pirate, contrarian ways that I always have to be the guy that's giving the other side of the argument. That the guy at the party is never, you know, he's never laughing. He's just debating you.
Yeah, I one my best friend growing up became like that as an adult, and I like can't talk to him anymore
Yeah.
because it's like I can literally like it doesn't matter what I say. I've tested this. I can say literally anything, and he's just gonna say the other thing. And that becomes your tribe. That becomes your community. Like we're contrarians together. So you it doesn't matter like what you're doing, right? This is the hilarious thing about it is that like what decisions you make it is irrelevant. It's how you are going about making them and the way that you are relating to yourself as you're making them that matters, right? Because you can make the end result look the same. Two people can make the same calls and it looks the same, but the way to getting there feels completely different inside you. And I can promise you that the person who got there from this place of listening to themselves is going to be able to sustain their performance much, much longer than the person who maybe chose the same answer this one time, but did it from this place of it has to look and seem a certain way.
Yeah. I really like the fact that there's different paths that reach the same destination in trading and in poker. Like if I think of a game like chess, I don't play chess personally, but even though there's a gazillion combinations, it does feel a little bit less like expressive in a way because if you're playing against high level competition, like I don't know if like the meta's there or like it's one on one, so there's maybe less variables that can change or I don't know if you know chess well, but am I on the right path at all here? And that it feels
Mhm.
almost a little less creative to end it the same path.
I have no idea about
Yeah,
chess either, so we
yeah,
would just be two guys who don't know about chess talking about chess.
that's fair. That's fair.
Uh,
So
yeah.
when I listened to some of your stuff, the way I kind of came across you was like on the Jason Alderman podcast.
Oh yeah, Jared Alderman. Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
Jared. Yeah, and it was really cool. Like I would think you guys have done a few talks, but you're kind of in the same realm. You kind of do similar things, and you both have a very that chill thing going on. You know, but anyways, you guys had a interesting conversation. I think it was in your most recent one where you talked about like the inability to so the example was you're reaching a new stake in poker, and it was the stake that you've always wanted to kind of get to. And then when you get there, you can't actually like bask in that moment and enjoy it. Um, and there's like multiple ways you could go, but a lot of people end up kind of in a way, I don't know, sabotaging themselves or finding a way to go back down. Maybe they don't feel like they belong there, or they're just not able to, like you said, kind of have a sense of the present moment and what's actually happening. There's probably thoughts about, you know, the future, the anxiety, or thinking about what could happen if you lose and going back down and not wanting to associate with being like back down at the smaller limits. So uh how have you kind of thought more about that, and how have you helped people, you know, when they get to, you know, this applies to me too, where I've reached a certain level in my trading
Yeah.
where I don't necessarily have the drive to go up stakes, but I also don't want to fall back. And sometimes I just forget to be happy that I'm where I am after all this time.
Yeah, so there's so much going on there, right? So most people are really poor at kind of celebrating accomplishments in general, right? And celebrating in kind of this culture is kind of looked down upon too, right? Like why are you so happy with yourself? Don't be so full of yourself. And so there's that, which is that like people in general have a hard time enjoying their success. In addition to that, it's certainly not helping that, especially in my industry, in the poker industry. Like, uh, if you follow my stuff, I know you're on my email list, or at least you were for a while. Maybe you still are, but like I spend most of my time on there just railing on what everybody else is offering in terms of advice for these situations, right? Because the advice is all logic oriented solutions to problems that are emotional in nature, right? So logical solutions around, well, just think about it this way, right? Just approach it the same way you approached the lower level. don't change anything about the way you're thinking about it, which is great, except you're not going to be capable of that because inside you don't feel the same way that you felt at the lower level where you're very comfortable, right? And so if you have lots of tension and stress and pressure inside, it's going to create thoughts inside you that are reflecting that tension and pressure and stress. And you need a way to kind of release that and be with that and process that. And all the advice out there, the reason why I hate it so much is because it just ignores the truth, which is that like I feel completely different when I am doubling the stakes, and the potential for loss and gain is more than double usually when you double the stakes. And that is not something that should be ignored, right? That's something we need to go into more, not kind of use words and ideas and philosophy to circumvent, right? So you can say, oh, yeah, just approach it the same way. But you're not capable of approaching it in the exact same way because you're not the same person stepping into the arena when you've kind of gone and doubled the stakes, right? You feel different, so you are a different person, which has different needs in order to perform at a high level. So maybe let's address that instead of just saying, "Oh yeah, just pretend it's the same." That's nonsense.
Yeah, that strikes a chord. First of all, the simple idea that you can't cast this wide blanket, like right. The It happens in poker, it happens in trading. Everybody says like take the emotion out of it, right? Which I'm sure is like the literal base level frustration you have, and one of the reasons you do this for a job, right? But the fact that every person in each situation is going to feel completely different, and that you are going to feel not completely different, but different at least a little bit each time you step in the arena as just yourself. So it's not even just different people. You're going to
Yeah,
feel different each time. It's like the guy who's taking his first shot at 25-50 versus the guy who's taking his 10th shot, who's just fucking over it, and maybe he
yeah,
actually does well that time because he's like a little more present and
yeah,
comfortable and able to work through that.
yeah.
Yeah. So have you uh how many of the people like deal with this problem? Do you feel like it's I feel like it's one of those things that probably everybody it's like one of the biggest issues for people in both these realms. Kind of in a weird way it comes back to this situation.
I would say that, if you want to just look around, right? I read something that really resonated with me recently where they're like, yeah, if you want to just see what doesn't work, just look around and see what everybody else is doing, because mostly like almost everybody you talk to is going to be like somewhat unhappy with where they're at, and they don't have quite the level of success that they think they should, and they work hard but they're not getting the results. So let's just assume that like 80 to 90% of people kind of fit into that bucket of like, I think I'm supposed to be winning this much or earning this much, but I'm earning less, right? And so if you just look around, it's like, okay, what are they doing when these emotional issues hit? They're all going into their head more, right? And the problem is that going into their head is what caused them to have these emotional issues in the first place. So you're just like doing more of the thing that caused the problem. So almost nobody actually takes this head on and leans into the emotion more and feels it more, and knows how to kind of process it in a way that's healthy, right? In a way that kind of helps you feel clear, in the way that maybe if you're very sad and you have a big cry, it's very cathartic, right? If you're very scared and you let yourself actually feel that, it will start to feel good after a while. And so I would say 99.9% of people who are in these fields don't approach it this way. They're all trying to circumvent it because it sounds easier to just say, okay, just be logical. Let's look at my history. I'm a good poker player. I'm a good trader. I have a long history of success. There's nothing to worry about. Well, that's the logical play, and it's very easy to just tell yourself that. It doesn't require you to do the kind of deeper, harder emotional work of feeling the discomfort and being with it, and accepting it and loving yourself through that moment in time, right? But that easy thing just digs the hole deeper because it might make you feel better today, but at some point that thing's going to crater, and you will reach a point where like it doesn't work anymore, and it just sounds and feels like you're this kind of crazy person just repeating this empty mantra that doesn't actually carry any meaning.
Yeah, when you say that, I think of a visual of like Frogger in a way where like he's going across a road and then there's like something in front of him and he's like, I gotta go around that to get here and then I gotta go around this next one. When really it's like that kind of Ryan Holiday, like the obstacle is the way, right? Like you need to, instead of
Yeah,
going around the thing, you need to go literally hop right on it and feel it. And then hopefully by the time you've hopped on that and felt it and moved on, that eventually that road won't actually have that same obstacle anymore. There'll be a new obstacle, I'm
yeah,
sure, as we all have,
yeah,
but like you'll work your way through that one.
yeah. Yeah, like you are the obstacle, right? Like you are the one who's creating this scenario over and over for yourself by not kind of attending to the actual problem. And the real skill, like people think that the way to make it to the top is to be the most knowledgeable, right? That's why everybody's so entitled, probably in trading as well as poker, is like, oh, I've read all the books, I know all this stuff. When I'm talking about it with my friends, I always know the right answer. But then when I'm actually doing it, I can't quite find the right thing. Well, that's because you're not doing the work to feel that level of comfort inside yourself when the pressure's on, right? And until you learn how to do that, you're going to keep running into the same issue over and over. It will look a little bit different each time. Like, okay, the situation today will be a little bit different than the one next week. So you'll think they're two different problems, but they're not. It's just the one thing, which is that you never learned how to feel uncomfortable and still feel okay feeling uncomfortable, and trusting that, like, I'm still here, I'm still all right. You always run for the solution. You're always going to run for the solution until you decide to, like, do it the other way.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's super important. I had to deal with this in trading myself. There's a book called Market Mind Games. I'm not sure if you've ever read that. It's by Denise
No.
Scholl. And I worked with one of her coaches for a while, and he's big on like triggers. Like I'd explain, I don't know, a session or a week or whatever, and as I'm going through it, he would kind of pick out the points where I'm like, I felt like I was blah blah blah, and he'd be like, wait a second, what did you feel? Right? And it'd be always kind of digging into that comment over and over. And a lot of the time I'd realize there was a time where I get very like physically when the pressure starts building up and I'm in situations, I feel it physically. I heat up. I'll like sweat a little bit. My breathing will just kind of stop, right? I'll kind of go, it won't be like heavy breathing, it'll just be like choked up breathing and then I'll back out of it eventually and I'll be like, Jesus Christ, like what was that, right? And now like the object of what we worked on was and I'm actually going to be interviewing him on the next episode, but the thing was I had to like get better and better and better at first recognizing when that was happening. Like when was I starting to get that heat up feeling? Because when I'm doing well and I'm in a state of like just accepting everything, feeling good, feeling I don't know, at one with the markets. I don't feel hot and sweaty. I just feel chill. I'm cool. I'm breathing normally.
Yeah,
I'm listening to music. It's all
yeah,
good. But so now it's like funny, right? Because when I feel it coming, I'm like, oh, there it is. Like I feel hot. I'm like, is the AC on in here? Like what's going on? And just that ability to recognize that quicker, I'm now like, okay, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm gonna just back off for a second. I'm not gonna like click into that next trade. I like to call it like shadow boxing. I'm gonna like fake it. I'm not actually gonna make the next move until I feel like I've I don't know, regained a sense of composure or come down a little bit. So do you see a lot of
yeah.
people that have that physical emotion, and then what are the other examples of people that maybe go more inward on the mental side?
Yeah, everyone has a slightly different fear response, right? So some people will, in as their way of dealing with it, they'll push through, and like it almost feels like they have to take an action. Like I got to do something
Mhm.
and fight my way through it. Some people that just run and just be like, I gotta get out of here, just get me out of here. Some people will kind of freeze up and you're just sitting there. It's like, I know I'm supposed to do something, but I kind of can't. And others will just kind of like fade. And this was mine. It would just feel like like I'm still here, but like I'm not. I'm also not here. I'm just kind of vacant. That was mine that I needed to kind of work through quite a bit. And so everybody just kind of has their own different flavor of it. You can combine them. You can Some of them are sequential. You'll start with one and then go into another. But yeah, like you said, the important thing is really training yourself to recognize that it's happening sooner and sooner and sooner so that you can make a different decision. Right. That's how the behavior pattern gets reversed or changed, is that you catch yourself while it's happening, not think about it afterwards. Right. This is why I say there's these like eternal therapy patients who every week will just come in and talk about what happened and talk about, okay, this is what happened. This was not good. I think this is why. And let's talk about it. Well, this does nothing because you're not actually engaging with it while it's happening. And so you're just going to repeat the same thing over and over. And the
Mm.
exercise of trying to figure out why it's happening is useless anyways, because you're in your head. Right. And so yeah, it really just comes down to really doing the work to recognize the discomfort and then go into it and then have some training to make a different decision, to change the feeling a little bit, to change the way the energy is flowing so that you can kind of move back towards being present. And the more intention and commitment you have to feeling present before that happens, when you do run into those triggers, that those events that kind of make you feel that way, it will impact you a lot less and you'll be able to catch it much more quickly, right? So it's all kind of like one big puzzle.
Yeah, I feel like that's where you're going to help a lot of people for sure. And being that I'm like physically responsive a lot, I felt like as we worked through this, breathing became a big thing for me, especially like box breathing because it's so intentional. Um, and that was able to kind of click me out for a second, just kind of like bring me back into my body. And then just like a walk or leaving the room, as simple as those things are for somebody who physically responds a lot, I felt like it was very good for me. Whereas somebody who, like is more of this like a pull off, I'm going to go browse the internet type of person and their body's not responding like mine does. I'm sure their way to get back into a present state is it's like the recovery thing is like much different for them. Maybe breathing isn't like going to be their thing.
Yeah, it just kind of depends. You got to kind of get in there with each person individually to check in on like, well, how do you experience it, right? Because until I know how you actually experience it, I could kind of assume something and it might be completely wrong. So when I work with people, I always want to check in and it's like, well, what's the actual experience like of you checking out? What does that feel like? And let's map it out and let's get you real familiar with kind of the start of that process so that we can kind of plant the seed in your head and your mind can start to work for you and recognize that it's happening. And then by then, hopefully we've trained you in some different tools and skills that you can use to move in another direction, right? But everybody's different is kind of the way I found.
So do you feel like there's a typical, like more often than not, the people you see at the peak are a certain way? Or is it even at every single level, there's just a hogwash of just different kind of stress responses and ways they deal with it?
Yeah, I think everybody just does it differently in their own way. And honestly, a lot of the people at the top, they're not dealing with it either. Like I've seen this a lot. People at the very top, I can tell that they are kind of pushing through the emotions and not giving them awareness and not working on these things. They are high enough achievers and skilled enough at what they do and able to compartmentalize enough at a high enough level to make it through their games and continue to get the success that they're craving. But there's a there's a trade-off on the other side of that. I've had lots of people show up to work with me where they're like, yeah, I have all the money I want, I play great poker, but then as soon as I stop, I go yell at my wife
Right.
have to go launch into 8 hours of Netflix and smoke weed and drink and all that stuff, right? And so to me, that's not exactly high performance. You're making money, but you're trading off in other areas around it, and so yeah, that's possible for some. It's not possible for everyone to kind of work it that way, but yeah, some people kind of do it like that too. So yeah, it's just kind of, I've seen many many different situations, but the one common thread is that inability to sense that the shift is happening, lean into it, kind of do the work inside yourself to kind of come out the other side. And each time you do it, it builds confidence, right? It builds genuine, real confidence that like you're a person who I can throw anything at you and you might not know what's going on, but you're not going to freak out, and you know that you're going to eventually do something that you're happy with, right? And ultimately that's what everybody who's performing wants, is to, it's not like perfection, but it's to just go out, do your thing, and not go home with like a bunch of regrets, right? And just know that like at each decision point I was fully present. I was aware of what was happening inside me. I was tuned into what was happening in the environment, and I was listening to my instincts and making good choices, and choices that I was happy with. And as long as you're happy in each moment and you feel that connection, it's okay if you don't get the result that you want. You'll go home with a clear conscience and you'll sleep well, right? But there's plenty of times where you can not feel that, kind of back into a decision that works out in your favor, but then you're up all night being like, oh man, that was a
Yeah.
close one. I
Yeah.
shouldn't have done that. I escaped that one. I got the money, but I'm not happy with it, right? And so it's not about, again, what you choose that matters. It's how you feel when you make the decision that is ultimately going to determine like how you feel about it and how you look back on it later.
So would you say that you think a true mistake is when you are feeling that way, when you are doing the things you want to do in the moment, you feel like you're in that proper mode, and then you still go against that? Would you classify that as like an error that you can look back on and be like, no, that was a mistake? That wasn't like, I didn't know what was going on. I like actively went against that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a thing where like people will get to the very end of the road, right? They'll be like fully engaged, locked in, and this is how they got to the point where they kind of knew what the play was that they're, and all you have to do is make that last leap. But then at the last second, the head pops in. Well, what about this? Or what am I gonna? How am I gonna defend this if this doesn't go wrong, or whatever other mechanism that is built in, that last line of defense of the mind, just taking control one last time will kind of get people from time to time. And the word mistake, you can call it whatever you want, but it's definitely an experience people are unhappy with later, right? So
Yeah.
if, I guess the end goal is to make decisions that you feel at peace with moving forward forever, then yeah, I guess that's a mistake.
I feel like maybe that type of mistake is a little easier to learn from because you reached it in such a clear path that you kind of felt like that was the right path, and then you that little thing got you at the end. But at least maybe if you could recognize that, you're like, okay, hopefully I just don't do that again. Like I gotta reach the same end of that road, and like next time I'll probably be able to make the proper decision.
I mean, maybe, maybe not,
Yeah.
right? Like it depends on what you're prioritizing and what your commitment level is to learning how to do that. Because if you get to that last step over and over and you continually sabotage yourself right at that last moment, and you don't actually seek out a way to kind of bring yourself back into the moment and make different choices, well, no, you're just going to relive that pain over and over, right? And is that any different than the person who
It's probably the worst one,
is
actually. I guess that's
not
probably
checked
the
in?
worst
Yeah.
way to
Yeah, yeah.
do it.
Yeah, right, because then it's like, "Oh, it's just this one last thing." So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you could argue that it's way worse because you've got all the knowledge, you've done all the work, you just right at the finish line and then you just stumble. I mean, that might be even worse. I don't know.
Yeah, I like to think of a good example of that right now as crypto. So like, you know, if you're involved with crypto, you're going to realize what the last few years has been like, right? And we have these cycles, and now the previous cycles have been in a certain economic environment, and now we're in this new cycle, which is a completely different environment. But I've kind of planned throughout this whole time as to what I want to do, what I want to allocate, and I'm comfortable with doing it. And there's still every day, there's still a little part of me that's like, dude, pull the plug, get out. Like, I know you believe in this, you got your conviction, that's all cute and everything, but get out. Like, there's, and I just, it's interesting because I feel like there's just been this long, like 2-year road, like this, this downfall, this reallocation, this rebalancing, figuring out what projects I think will have a future, putting in an amount of money that I feel like I'm comfortable with, like being zeroed out and like all that stuff. And there's still a part of me at the end that sees like something bad come out on X, or some legislation thing goes against him. I'm just like, get out, don't do it. You're going to hurt yourself even more, even though I've kind of like worked through this whole process and thought of all of the outcomes. So it's kind of like what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So
Oh
I'll
yeah,
probably sell
exactly,
everything
right.
today.
And you yeah, and you've see, like, you've done the work, you've got the knowledge, you're in the field, and so, like, there's no more you could learn that would help you to make decision either way, and so that's just, like, that's the fear response, right, coming up each time you see something in the news, each time you, whatever, experience that feeling of, like, "Oh, yeah, just get out." Well, that's the fear, and that might be ultimately the answer that you land on, and it might not, but the important thing is that you need to actually like go into that and explore that and be with that and really stay with that feeling and be present with it. And then when you have that connection again, ask yourself again, is like, okay, is this what I want? What do I want? And everybody's asking that question, in these big spots, big money on the line, high pressure. They're asking this question, okay, like, what should I do? What do I want to do? But you can't answer that question when you're disconnected, right? Because
Right.
the answer is going to come from this place of being just projecting from the fear, from the mind. And so that's not a valid question to ask until you are present again. Then when you land back into connection again and you feel that, okay, I feel good, I feel like I'm in the right space to make the decision, then ask, okay, what do I want? That's a clear answer of what your gut instinct, intuition is telling you. But you can't just be like, okay, what does my gut say, when you're completely freaking out and
Yeah.
not addressing it in any way, because that's not going to be a true representation of how you feel.
Yeah. To continue on this example, as you're saying that, I'm running through right now a clear space for me because we've seen the same prices for so long. But I know that in previous cycles, there have been moments where the entire crypto market will go down another 30 or 40% right before it finally starts its kind of new cycle. But then you have to ask yourself, like, if something drops 30 or 40% from even here, are you really going to be with the wherewithal to like catch a perfect bottom or want to buy in or talk yourself into like that's going to be that moment where all of the work comes into play. So I've talked to myself of like, I have to be okay with that. I have to be okay with that destructive move that could potentially come, because I don't trust myself to make a better decision in that moment. And then when that moment comes, I'm hoping I can recheck in and have this conversation with myself to not make any irrational decisions in that moment. Yeah. So just working through that situation. Don't sell your bitcoins.
Yeah. This is a game that never ends, right?
Mhm.
Because we're always here. and so
Yeah.
and so like the thoughts can just always come in and start again. And so like at each point of the journey, whether you're swinging way up, and lots of people have issues around, oh yeah, it's too much, I can't hold it, I can't hold the feeling of like, it feels too good, I got to do something to feel more normal. Oh, sabotage, bad move, and now we're back down to more level. And same deal when you're going down, is like, oh yeah, it's freaking me out. And the reactivity, right? Are you going to make your decisions from that feeling of reactivity and not feeling like you're yourself? Or are you going to find your way into feeling it back? And it's just a constant practice, especially crypto, where the markets never close.
Hmm.
You don't get a break to
Okay.
do this. You have to make your own breaks and prioritize it. I have a good friend who trades, or I guess he used to trade full time. Now he's doing, I think, hedge funding now. But he was like, yeah, crypto is like the purest market, and partly because it never shuts down, and so you just have to be how you are being and make your decisions in that moment. There's no time to regroup, and it's quite beautiful actually.
Yeah, the one Wild West left out there, it seems. Pretty crazy.
Yeah.
But okay, we'll end with one last thing. One thing I wanted to talk about was like a little bit of game flow, and that's something that transitions from poker to trading as well. Where in poker, it's a little more like I'm talking live poker, actually online as well, but like you can see your opponents, right? You can actively tell often when a game flow is changing. A guy that was the bad player at the table leaves. He's gone. You know how people have been doing during that session. Who's stuck? Who made all the money? What time is it? Is everybody like you could kind of feel the game flow very obviously. Um, Sometimes, but trading is a little bit interesting, right? You're playing like a 1v1 with yourself at all times because you have no information of your opponents, right? I mean, you could from what I do, you could see orders in a book and stuff like that, but generally speaking, you don't know who they are, you don't know what their situation is. Are they buyers? Are they sellers? Are they hedging? Are they arbitrage? You have no idea. So what is some of the stuff that you've kind of thought about through game flow, and have you ever thought kind of going into you're talking to more traders and stuff, but of the kind of oddly different game flow, even it's the same but it's not, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that approach that you described is more of like external categorization of game flow. I would say of like, oh yeah, this guy left, so the game is not as good. So this is going on, and to me, it's more of like a again comes down to feeling, and the more emotionally aware you are inside yourself, the more willing you are to just like feel your own feelings and get like intimately friendly and familiar with them and know them at a deeper and deeper level, the more easy it becomes to be able to sense the emotions kind of out there with others. So in poker, it's more condensed because you're just playing against anywhere from 1 to 8 people, and so I found personally that whether playing online or live, it's not that different. Like emotions are a thing that we can feel between humans, and so that's just a thing that's like if I'm connected to mine at a very high level, I'm much more open and receptive and able to sense what's happening in my opponents. And so with trading, I imagine it would be more of like my emotional awareness can increase my capacity to understand and sense the emotions happening out there, maybe in the collective or something like that. And so it really just starts in here, right? And I would explore it as this way of like I want to get so in tune with my own feelings and kind of master them, and learn how they work and learn how to play with them and grow with them. And one of the fun byproducts of that is I'll just naturally, I won't even have to try to like do this intentionally, but I'll have more awareness of what's happening in the emotional states of people around me, whether it's people I love and care about, friends, or yeah, trading against other people. I can just have a greater sense of like what is happening out in the field, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of where I'm going, is like that's the perfect answer. Is it is going to come back to how you're feeling, because uh, if you could kind of more quickly sense a regime shift. So like a regime shift in the trading world is like, let's say a table goes from aggressive and loose to tight and passive. That shift in markets can take long time, or it could take a very condensed short time if there's like some news of a bombing or something, right? All of a sudden, table gets loose and aggressive. You can feel emotion. You could feel people trying to get in and out of positions. But then it might take me sessions, weeks, months to realize like, oh, like we're not in that regime anymore. That was like COVID was a perfect example, and one that I actually am proud of myself looking back on, is that I could start to feel the terror of that situation like slowly go down. And if you were to like look at the VIX, which is like the volatility indicator, you could see that after it spiked up to like its highest levels ever, it slowly, choppily kind of worked its way back to a tight passive game. And the ability to kind of recognize and feel that flow um, is hard, but it's like it has so much to do with your bottom line. It's insane. Like, if you're
Mm,
trying to
mm,
play like super aggressive in a game that's full of like super tight like old men at the Aria, like you're probably just gonna spew money and run into the nuts a lot, and then be like, "Why didn't it work when I was trying to play table captain?" You know. So it's just an interesting topic when it's like the crossover there. But I think poker prepared me very well for that.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes total sense, and it's one of those things where I'll say, like, if you're in your head and you're just like analysis, logic, logic, let me figure this out. What you're not is in your emotions. You're not in, your system. You're not in your this deeper part of you that can sense things, right? So if you're up in here, you can't be here. If you're not in here, you can't feel what's going on out here, right? If you can't feel what's happening here, you can't feel what's going on out there. No way. Your own house has to be clean first. And then, so the more that you fall into the like, oh yeah, like let me figure this out, then you've cut yourself off from yourself, which cuts you off from the greater emotional stuff happening out in the world. And that, like you said, is very expensive.
Yeah, and especially if you really fall into narratives, right? Because you start to think the collective is a certain thing when really, because you're not so great at absorbing and feeling the collective, you're late to that narrative and it's already working back the other way. So it's like very powerful to be able to quickly sense where other people are thinking. It's like gets into the meta of poker, the he's thinking, I'm thinking, fun part.
Yeah.
But super cool. All right, Jason, I know you got a baby, so I'll let you get going. I really appreciate I really appreciate this conversation. I hope you took something away. I took a ton away from this. It's going to help me become a better trader. So hopefully, if you guys have any interest, go follow him on Twitter, X, that thing, and sign up for his emails. He's out there writing every day. It seems like so. Um, do that, and if you're interested in talking to him more, DM him and see what he's all about for coaching and stuff like that. Any other shout outs for you, Jason?
No, feeling good, man. It's cool hearing about the parallels, and yeah, if you want to find me, yeah, Twitter is good. Uh, Daily emails is my favorite thing I do. So always writing about how I think people can help their performance, poker, life, family. It's all one game to me. So let's play.
Poker's the game of life, as it is for sure. Okay, guys, we will see you back for the next episode. Until then, thank you for joining. Thanks, Jason.